Well, it's great to welcome you to the latest episode in Scaling from the Edge. And today we're looking again at team performance, but specifically focusing on coaching and mentoring. And with teams working in different ways and with more remote working still obviously a key part of people's working lives, we've certainly seen that people are working in more isolated ways. And despite the great technology that is available, we know that most individuals still prefer coaching and training and those kind of performance conversations to be in person. And at Scalespace, we are a community of scale-up businesses, and our goal is to help them to be more successful more quickly, and bringing together leading universities and leading business builders. We're here to help unlock the potential of UK innovation. And part of that here at Scalespace White City, where we're working in partnership with Imperial College London, is around sharing relevant learnings and expertise. So I'm delighted that today we've got a really great expert panel with us to help explore this topic. So firstly, Harveen Chugh is a senior teaching fellow in entrepreneurship at Imperial College Business School. She teaches entrepreneurship and strategy, as well as conducting research on entrepreneurship coaching. She was globally recognized as one of the best 40 under 40 business school professors by Poets and Quants in 2019. So hi, Harveen. Dean Corbett is the Chief People Officer of Avado, and he leads the design and delivery of their people plan. Whilst facilitating a culture of success and belonging, he's an experienced performance, leadership and executive coach, and is currently working towards his MSc in coaching psychology. And Avado is one of the businesses that Blenheim Chalcott is a backer of. And Dominic Klein is the Deputy Director of the Imperial Venture Mentoring Service and the co-founder and chief operating officer of Orthonica. She's got a wide experience of product business and company development, starting a career as a research scientist for Unilever. She also holds an MBA with a focus on technology entrepreneurship from Imperial College London, and became the deputy director of the Venture Mentoring Service in February 2019. So thanks everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Firstly, maybe to Harveen, I hear a lot from the scale-up businesses that we work with that one of the great things about being a scale-up business is the learning and development that you get from the experience of being part of a scale-up, from the growth that you experience working in a business and being part of that team. So you might say, perhaps from an academic perspective, that development is very informal or maybe accidental. And we hear a lot about, the sort of on-the-job training benefits of being part of a scale-up. So just to help us set the scene here as we think about coaching and mentoring, could you perhaps give your perspectives on different approaches to coaching and mentoring and how they can be more structured and why that might be important based on your research?
Okay, thanks, Mark. So yeah, I think the first thing to say here would be that often the terms are used interchangeably, but coaching and mentoring are quite different. So just to set the scene a little bit, mentoring is more about giving guidance and direction, sharing advice and experience. Coaching, on the other hand, is more about facilitating and finding the answers. So on the one hand, with mentoring, it's saying, okay, this is what I think you should do. And with coaching, it's more about what do you think you should do. So it's really thinking about what stage the business is at. Is it a startup or a scale up? And what exactly are the business needs? What are the needs of the entrepreneur or the CEO? So from the research that I've done, I did a sort of a few field visits in 2019, at the end of 2019, on visiting different institutions and looking at different programs. And I saw a range of programs that broadly fell into two categories. So those that were lightly structured, I would say Imperial being one of them. I would have put others in that category like NYU, the Harvard Entrepreneurs in Residence program. And then those that were more highly structured, such as programs that I saw at Cambridge and Rotman School of Management, which is one called the Creative Destruction Lab. And my conclusion, looking across the board at a number of programs, was that actually a program needs to be semi-structured. It needs a degree of structure is important, maybe not too much, and maybe not sort of too much freedom, but there needs to be an element of both. but then it is also really looking at the stage that the entrepreneur's at, the stage the business is at. I would also say that business coaching is growing. There was an article just in the Times a couple of days ago, and so the demand for business coaching, demand for coaching from established businesses is something that's becoming increasingly popular even in the UK. So it's kind of it. I guess the perception is that we may not need coaching as we grow, but we definitely do, and that demand is growing. And I think I would also say, it can be sometimes about startups or companies that come from programs early on, but as they grow, they're not necessarily part of a university environment or a program where that support is provided. So with growth, I think naturally sometimes the environment around the company changes, and that's where coaching and mentoring that can be something that is provided early on and kind of given to you may not necessarily happen at a business for a business at a later stage. And so you have to almost be conscious and say, okay, do I need a mentor? Do I need a coach? What does my business need? So it can be at the individual level, and it can be for the business as well.
Okay, that's really helpful. I mean, I think we've talked before in one of this series about how businesses do change over time, and how the kind of situation you're in might lead you to have different needs. And certainly, we've certainly talked about the phenomenon of different stages of a business growth might need different approaches to leadership. Dominique, if I can just come to you, the Imperial Venture mentoring service is structured to support students and staff through their entrepreneurial journey. And I know it's mostly focused on startups, but maybe you can tell us a little about how the framework could be applied to scale up businesses as well, or maybe your perspectives on how the needs change as the business goes through its growth phases.
Thanks. Yes, I think that the entrepreneurial journey doesn't stop at the startup stage. So we support businesses from many different sources, whether they're students or from the academic community, from different schools of engineering or of natural sciences, or from medical school, and even from the business school as well. So we're quite used to dealing with people from many different backgrounds, and in fact I think one of the first questions that we always ask is, what's going to be the next added value point? What's going to be the next point where we can add value, and really focus on that. So the companies at a later stage will have a different question, but the process won't be that different. I would say the IVMS probably falls into Harveen's definition of a semi-structured program. We're quite organised about how we recruit our mentors into the program, because of course Imperial has a reputational risk associated with putting a pool of mentors together and offering them to the startups. So we're structured about how we recruit people, and we have a template for how you would approach your first meeting with the venture that you're mentoring. But we're not prescriptive about how the mentoring process actually goes from there. It's very much down to the experience of the mentors. So we recruit experienced mentors, or mentors with experience. Mm-hmm. We have a team-on-team approach, so we have more than one mentor in a panel to support each venture. And we're really focused on the success of the venture rather than necessarily the success of the individuals themselves. So we mentor a team. And so providing you stick with that framework, it's really down to the individuals to decide what's going to work best for them.
Okay. And Dean, in Avado, your experience of how to go about setting up mentoring and the kind of benefits that might bring?
We're on a culture change journey, and that's been true for the last year or so. So I've used mentoring as a way of meeting developmental needs of our people, and also as a way of driving that culture change from a relatively unstructured or creative chaos type culture to one with a bit more discipline. We set up the program in a semi-structured fashion to immerse our people into a journey of experiencing what a more disciplined approach might do for them and the business, but also so as not to throw people too far away from one reality into another. That probably would have felt a bit too foreign. So a semi-structured approach really, really helped here. It felt familiar enough for people to get involved in, and not too foreign to them, but it also met their needs, and it also helped us show what a more discipline might look like.
Okay, I mean that's very helpful. So I guess we've heard from Dominique that these things you kind of need to get that right. The skill of the mentor and the the delivery to the mentee. And we've now heard from you, Dean, that maybe that's not a massive amount of effort to get the ball rolling. Harveen, maybe and perhaps come back to something you said earlier. This distinction between coaching and mentoring. The idea that the mentor knows the answer to everything clearly isn't the point. But this balance of how you help people to grow and how you help them to develop, whilst also helping them solve problems more quickly, that seems like a really interesting challenge for a scale-up company. So if we believe this is something that's reasonably easy to get going, it also sounds like something you could easily get wrong. So your from your research, what's really important to get right, and maybe some examples of where you've seen it really drive performance?
Yeah, okay. So research shows that coaching is more has a greater link with growth than mentoring does. But mentoring is more about building resilience, increasing commitment, and increasing an entrepreneur's self-efficacy. So I guess you can think about it for me, it's yeah, like Dean said, like Dominique said, there's programs that the kind of, IVMS is one that's, a huge flagship for us. It's very successful. It's going really strong at Imperial. Dean's also, put one together fairly quickly at Avado. So I guess, programs are easy to get going running. And I think it's really thinking about, is that the right program, what that business needs at the time? And so just to kind of give a bit more background and context, so at the business school we teach sort of entrepreneurship modules and lectures, and part of that is providing coaching. And so at that point we're thinking very much about giving students the skills and ability to find the answers, and kind of build their skills in that sense. And a program like IVMS comes along later when they've developed the company, and actually it's very much about, okay, I know how this works, and I need to go and do. And that's where IVMS fits in, where mentoring is more required. And so I think I guess we can't assume that the needs will always be the same, and that's something to be conscious of. Am I getting the right support that I need at the right time? And so if we think about what the research shows, that coaching has a strong link with growth. So if your business is growing, you might think, well, actually, okay, that's something that's happening, and maybe I need to focus more on mentoring. But if you're struggling to get that growth, maybe you need to go back and get a little bit more coaching. So it's very much about that personal journey, not only as an entrepreneur and CEO, but for that venture. Because as Dominique said, for example, at the early stage, it's about the team. At the later stage, the scale up is managing more people, the skill sets change, it can be a more lonely journey. And so that CEO might need more of that one-to-one support at that time.
And we've certainly, again, talked previously about the loneliness of the CEO or the founder at times. So just going back to you, Dominique, the program that you're working on, do you have some examples maybe of where mentoring has made a real difference to the success of a team?
think my overall comment is that mentoring process, we aim to help the ventures to develop clarity, so clarity of thinking. And that could be about the intellectual property. So it might be a very, making a judgment call about when to file a patent or whether to file a patent application. So there are lots of, there's experts in residence, there are lots of experts who can help them to actually file the patent, but it's making a decision about what's the right IP strategy. That was particularly successful in one of the companies which had not filed intellectual property, but they had a business model that was looking at licensing later on. So without filing their patent early, they risked disclosing information which would then make their patent application invalid. That could be about, facing hard truths about just who is in and who is not in, and having to share. So ventures there's a difficult question about equity split. So sometimes our ventures are not even formed, the companies have not incorporated, and they're having to make decisions about how to share the equity with the people that will help them to make the venture succeed. I'm thinking about one particularly difficult conversation where, so we have a single founder, and she needed some technical support in the lab, but didn't want to bring her lab partner in as an equity holder. So if they're not brought in as an equity holder, they don't have the same vested interest in success. That was always going to be a big risk when she's seeking investment, or when she's seeking grant funding, or developing the company, marketing partners or licensing partners. It was always going to be a big risk. So it was facing a hard truth really about how to plan for success in the future. So a little bit of looking into the future, bringing clarity, looking at technical development, sharing networks, bringing in a bit of perhaps market research. Some of our mentors have experience of previous investments in relevant fields and can introduce our mentees to their network, and that has been really valuable for companies. Or introductions to big companies that have previously licensed or collaborated in a similar field, and looking at deal structures. That's been very useful too. Those are a few examples.
And very good ones, thank you. And I guess as part of that, one of the things that I might imagine is there's a need to sort of review constantly why you're doing the mentoring and what it's going to give you. Because if the business situation changes, or the priorities change, or indeed the key question of the day has changed, you might need a very different person to be your mentor. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, I think COVID was quite a good example. So suddenly we have a completely different set of business circumstances, and some of the early stage companies were carrying on as before, whereas actually they really needed to think, business is different now. What do our customers actually want? Who are our customers? Have they changed? Have their needs changed? And so actually just taking a step back and thinking about those difficult decisions to make was very useful for some of them. One of the companies that I mentor is a company that is essentially using gaming technology to improve compliance with physiotherapy program. Okay. Of course, physiotherapists couldn't see their patients face to face. I think that's now starting again. But there was a big opportunity for them to look at how they could perhaps gather more information about for their product development programs by using the physiotherapists who are at home and not seeing patients, and perhaps doing different things differently. And that was a successful outcome for them.
Great. There's clearly a lot to think about as you embark on this. So Dean, maybe what advice might you have for a business that's thinking of implementing something more structured around mentoring, or would you recommend other approaches like hybrid coaching, for example?
First thing is to be really clear about why you're doing it. So we had a culture change need and a need to develop our people in their own development. So we set it up in a certain way that had those two goals in mind. Second thing was making sure it's really in line with the feel of our organization. So cultural alignment is really, really key. And using it as a change mechanism is really important, as long as you don't go too far, as I said earlier. It depends also on the types of people you have. If you're working with quite highly structured or regimented job roles or people, or you're working with more creative or more unstructured people, what sorts of behaviours do you need them to have going forward? What are you asking them really to learn as a result of it? But yeah, all of these things need to be taken into account. And also be really, really clear about what the mentoring does by way of process. You don't want to undermine or contradict the performance management process between line managers and their teams. So be really, really clear about mentoring and how it is additive to what you already have, rather than what could potentially be a distraction. Another point is create and give really, really good guidance to those mentoring and those being mentored. The guides we developed included questioning skills, listening skills, goal theory, etc. for the mentors. We shared that also with those being mentored, because it was the right thing to do, and we have a value of transparency. The second thing we did was training for those being mentored. And the reason we did that was a lot of our people were not particularly experienced. They were quite early on in their careers. And so the idea of mentoring was quite a new concept to them. They might have experienced something like it at university or in even earlier in their career. But what I wanted to get across was mentoring is very much a two-way process. And to get the most out of it, you have to understand that in the process you're going to build self-awareness, so be open to that. In the process you're going to learn how to have more discipline and set goals. Be open to that, and how to be open to that. How to also stretch beyond your comfort zone, but not so far that it's too uncomfortable that you end up failing. Those sorts of things were really, really important. And finally, the need to be committed. So we trained our people on how to exit the program, how to give honest feedback if one particular mentor wasn't right for them or wasn't working for them. So being really, really clear that this is an adult to adult relationship, and this is how you have an adult to adult relationship. And really, this guidance helped all of those participating become really clear on the expectations and the ways of working. Our process was a success because we were able to see improvements in people's experiences of working at Avado, such as they told us after the program that they would be likely to, they'd be more likely to stay at Avado. They said they would recommend the program and Avado to a friend or colleague as a result of the program. And they also felt that their development needs were being met better than they had done previously. So some really great people outcomes there.
So I think it's some really good advice there. The sort of I hadn't really thought about it, but the support for the mentee, I think, is really a really interesting observation. Dominique, in the IVMS program, what what experience do you have of how you can be a good mentee, let alone a good, how you can find good mentors?
Well, the way the IVMS works is that you pitch as a venture, you pitch to the pool of mentors, and as part of that pitch, you say what skills you think you're looking for. What are the challenges that you're facing, and what kind of mentoring skills you're looking for? So there's an element of selecting your own mentor, but you have to pitch to attract the attention of the mentors as well. So that's makes it a bit competitive. So I think that is a very important part of our process. In addition, we kind of tend to think of the mentoring as having a beginning, a middle, and an end. So they're sort of 6 to 9 months, maybe 12 months. Sometimes it's longer than that. But you can refresh your mentoring needs at any time during that stage, or as you come to the end of that, and then perhaps extend the panel of mentors that you're working with to include another person, or perhaps to include advice from other mentors in the pool. So there's quite a lot of bringing in, you're choosing, you as a venture are choosing what skills you need and then who you are networking with. So it's a facilitated matching program, but then there's an element of you, the venture, looking at the mentoring pool and trying to figure out, actually, is there somebody else in there who has some really good contacts that I could use, some really good experience I could use.
And Harvey, from the sort of research side of things, anything you've observed around the sort of practicalities of mentoring?
Around the practicalities, I would say it comes down to, I think building on what Dominique said, I would say it does come down to people. Both coaching and mentoring relationships are ultimately, people having different forms of conversations. And so it's important to, absolutely, think about what is needed at different times. And you can move, for example, in the IVMS, can move between different mentors at different times. And if you don't feel someone has the right approach for you, again, that's another reason, which is fair enough. No hard feelings. They might be really helpful to somebody else, but it's just not right for you or what you need at that time. But I think one of the key points, as Dean said, is really what is the goal of any program? What are you trying to achieve? And that's key because some programs, for example, at the more startup stage in a university environment, can be more about learning and building skills. Later stage programs, IVMS, things happening at Scale Space or in other programs are more about growth and KPIs. And so, where do you need that mentor or coach to get you to? And that's something to kind of keep thinking about. That could even change every couple of months or so. It's not necessary that, you say you need a coach and 1 year later you still have that coach, because probably something's not being updated then, and it should be. And I would say that another key point that Dean hit upon is really, as you're moving from the startup to the scale up space, you're really building that culture and you're building that management and leadership style, and that's really important as well. Like you said, the traits, the expectations that you're building, how employees respond to you. And so it's how you can, I guess for me, it comes down to a constant state of reflection and review. And I think that should be happening in any company, because I think we've all seen in the last few months, if you sit back and expect things are always going to stay the same, well, things change, and you've got to sort of keep that agility as you progress.
And we have talked before. We touched on it today. This idea of sort of loneliness of the CEO or the founder, but also sometimes perhaps a misguided perception that you should know the answer to everything. And so it seems to me that from the conversation we've had today, that the idea of mentoring and being committed to it would be quite a good way of demonstrating to your growing organization that you were looking outside for answers, and that you weren't trying to kind of look inward to solve all of the problems, but you're actually much more attuned to finding help from people around you and people you might connect to. Is that a fair a benefit you could attribute to this?
Yeah, I think that's definitely is to avoid being insular and make sure that there's an objective element to your that you're bringing into your venture in some form. And it absolutely sends a signal, whether it's your startup team or your growing scale up team. It sends a signal about who you are. And yes, I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I'm willing to listen, be open, get that feedback. And that's something that research has shown us as well, that coachability, the kind of listening to feedback, being open as an entrepreneur or CEO is really important for investment as well.
I completely agree. And Dominic, just coming back to your program, this just sort of coming back to this idea of helping people sort of get to the answer more quickly, perhaps, and working with teams to give them access to know-how or shortcutting to the solution. That sounds to me, from my experience, like something that'd be really valuable to a scale up, because it would potentially accelerate you through that growth phase, maybe help avoid you making some mistakes that others could have pointed out were going to be mistakes before they happened. Is that, again, is that a fair characterization of what this could be?
Very much so. I think mentoring, having a mentor is seen as a sign of strength rather than weakness. Mm-hmm. And the mentor pool that we have can offer a fantastic range of experience and network of contacts. We have to tread a fine line, because we don't want our mentors to, we don't want to create a conflict of interest between the mentors and the ventures. So you don't actually want the mentor to be doing business with the ventures unless there's a kind of a very transparent process and some kind of third party or another mentor who's coming in who can endorse this approach and agree that this is the right way for the company to move forward. So that is one of the aspects that we have to be really careful about. So the reputational risk I mentioned earlier, that extends to managing conflicts of, or helping the mentors and the ventures to manage conflicts of interest. But yes, generally speaking, opening up the lines of communication between the ventures and partners is a really valuable tool, and one that accelerates growth tremendously.
Which is great to hear. And Dean, just coming back to Avado, you touched on some of this already, but it sounded like the benefits for the individuals involved around their careers, their retention, their the way they had the relationship they had with Avado as their employer. They sounded like there's some real big wins there. I'm guessing that's also contributed to them being more effective and Avado being more successful. Is that fair?
Just to build on previous conversations where Dominique said CEOs don't necessarily have all the answers, and they're actually confident in that knowledge that they don't have the answers. This is really exciting for me, because I've also grown increasingly confident that businesses need people to be learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls, and that they need their organizations as a whole to outlearn the competition. I picked this up from a lady called Leanne Renninger, who's a close partner of Avado. So I quote her with pride, steal that one with pride. But coaching, mentoring, and even bigger learning programs are all therefore really, really important to the success of your organization. And as I said before, there are clear people-related successes that we've experienced. But yes, learning overall, in which mentoring plays a really important part, it certainly can play a really important part, as can coaching, has in our case had some commercial benefits as well. So for example, through mentoring, we've been able to identify skills that people have that can be applied differently. That was particularly true during our response to COVID and the lockdown. And more importantly, this way of using our mentoring network that we've been able to build over the last year or so has led to improvements in product innovation, which in turn have led to improvements in overall performance. So some really, really decent, tangible commercial wins there as well.
So look, I'm going to come back to each of you to maybe share your top tip or your key thought for a scaling organization that might be thinking about mentoring or something more structured in this space. I think we've heard today, I think a really fascinating set of evidence for how this can deliver benefit for individuals in an organization and also for the organization. I think we've also heard that it needs a bit of structure, I think, and the degree to how structured it is might be company specific. But I think one of the key takeaways for me is it's not static. You've got to sort of review why you're doing it. You've got to have a purpose. So what's the goal of the mentoring that you're setting out to have? I think something that's very close to my heart and some of the things we talk about in scale space, the idea of getting to the answer more quickly and certainly avoiding perhaps cul-de-sacs that you could have avoided if only somebody had given you some good advice. That sounds like mentoring could be a way of unlocking some of that. Dominique, I love this idea of you can use mentoring as a way of connecting into other people's networks, and again, we know that's really important for scale up businesses. So again, I think we've heard today some really important and really significant benefits that these programs can deliver for scaling organizations. I think I suspect there's a bit of commitment needed from the organization to really make a success of it, and it's been great to hear Dean's examples from Avado, where it sounds like that's something that they've really got behind. But overall, it sounds like a pretty important tool that can go in the toolkit for a scale up. So thank you everybody for your contributions today. So if I may then, Harvey, perhaps your top tip or your key thought for people thinking about this.
Thanks, Mark. I think you summed it up really well, actually. I would say, one of the key words you used there was unlocking, and that's, definitely something that speaks to coaching to kind of, help shift those any blockers that there might be in a venture. And I think, from the discussion that we've had, yes, it's definitely about the goals and what you want to achieve. And I would say, do it, go for it, do it. I think, all ventures, all companies, entrepreneurs should have some form of coaching and mentoring. There's no sort of, major downsides that we know about yet. There's no detrimental impact on performance. So do it. Research is positive, but with the caveat that, bear in mind needs might change. So, it's not necessarily one process for life or for too long. It might change who it's for, who it's from, and what the business needs at different times.
Great. And Dominique?
Well, yes, picking up on that, I think doing it and embracing it and making it work for you. So it's not instead of you and your entrepreneurial drive, it's as well as, and it's not something you should need to become too reliant on, because you're the one driving your business. But it's a real networking is, I'd use that as a general term, but learning how to network with your mentors and using the mentor network is a really important part of building a successful organization, in my view. So it's really good to practice on your mentors to learn how to network and develop that as a skill.
Thank you. And Dean?
My top tip would cover all of those things already said. And I would add to that by saying, be deliberate and do it well. And as Dominique says, take everything you can get from it. Don't be wondering whether this is useful. It might not be useful now. It might very much be useful in the future. So take nothing for granted. Really, really take what you can. And as I say, be deliberate.
Thank you. Well, look, big thanks to you all. Thanks to Dean and Harvey and Dominique for giving us your time today and your insights. I've personally found them, again, fascinating and a good reminder of things that we should be thinking about and we should be doing. And I'm sure our community will find this really useful. As I said earlier, we're a community of scale-up businesses. Scalespace White City, which is in collaboration with Imperial College, is now open. So encourage people not only to look at us online on scalespace.co.uk, but pop down and see us in White City. And if you've enjoyed this episode, there are more on our website where you can subscribe to see future programs that we might run. So with that, just want to say a big thanks to the panel, and thanks to everybody for watching this episode. Thank you very much.